March 18, 1945, Ruhr River Valley. The steel drum weighs 32 pounds when empty. Packed with 2 anti-tank mines, a quarter-pound of C2 plastic explosive, and rigged with a pull friction igniter cannibalized from a smoke grenade, it weighs 68. Private First Class Eugene Kowalski knows this because he's the one who packed it, weighed it on the platoon supply scale, and watched his platoon sergeant confiscate it 3 hours later with a direct order never to build another one. Now Kowalski's lying in a crater that used to be somebody's garden, listening to the distinct crack of German Kar98k rifles chewing through what's left of Second Platoon. And he's thinking about that barrel. The rifles aren't random. 3 weapons, firing in rotation. 1 shot. Pause. 2nd shot. Pause. 3rd shot. Then the sequence repeats. Kowalski's been in combat since Normandy. He knows what disciplined fire sounds like. These aren't panicked conscripts burning through ammunition. These are shooters, trained men who understand angles, who've calculated distances, who know exactly how many rounds they can afford to spend. And they're winning. If you're just discovering this channel, we dive deep into the stories that changed how wars were fought. Real soldiers, real decisions, real consequences. Hit subscribe because we're just getting started. The math is simple and brutal. 47 American soldiers from Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 60th Infantry Regiment, 9th Infantry Division, pinned at an industrial slag heap 400 meters short of the Ruhr River crossing point. 3 German riflemen in a reinforced machine shop 200 meters northeast. No American artillery available because Doctrine Corps pulled every gun for the Rhine crossing operations 20 kilometers south. No air support because the ceiling's at 200 feet and dropping. No armor because the approach road is cratered from previous bombardment and hasn't been cleared yet. Lieutenant James Hartley's already tried twice. First attempt at 0730 hours involved a fire and maneuver assault with 3rd Squad, providing suppressing fire while 2nd Squad advanced. The German shooters let 2nd Squad close to 150 meters before opening fire. 3 men down in 8 seconds, all 3 shots center mass. Second attempt at 0845 used smoke grenades to mask movement. The Germans waited. When the smoke drifted enough to expose silhouettes, they fired again. 2 more casualties, both headshots through the dispersing smoke. That's when Hartley stopped trying conventional tactics and started looking at Kowalski. Because everyone in Charlie Company knows Kowalski builds things. Unofficial things, unauthorized things, things that don't appear in any Army technical manual, but have an unfortunate habit of working. The barrel started as an idea during the Hürtgen Forest in November 1944. Kowalski's squad had been tasked with clearing a German supply depot. Inside, among the scattered equipment and abandoned positions, they found dozens of empty fuel drums. Standard German Wehrmacht 200-liter drums, steel construction, weatherproofed seams. Kowalski looked at those drums and saw potential. The German defensive positions in the Ruhr industrial zone weren't like the bunkers at Normandy or the pillboxes along the Siegfried Line. These were improvised strong points in factory buildings, machine shops, foundries, structures with reinforced concrete floors designed to support heavy equipment, walls thick enough to stop American 75mm tank rounds, windows and firing ports positioned for industrial ventilation, now repurposed for interlocking fields of fire. Standard American infantry tactics for this situation called for combined arms assault, armor to suppress, artillery to reduce, infantry to close and clear. But March 1945 in the Ruhr wasn't a standard situation. Every available tank, every artillery piece, every air sortie was allocated to major crossings. The Rhine, the Sieg, the Ruhr itself, at designated crossing points. Small unit actions like Charlie Company's push to secure a secondary approach route didn't rate priority support. That left innovation, field expedient solutions, the kind of improvised tactics that work once, maybe twice, before the enemy adapts or friendly commanders shut them down as too dangerous. Kowalski had been perfecting his barrel technique since Hürtgen. The concept was mechanically simple, but tactically complex. Take a cylindrical container, pack it with explosives. Rig an ignition system on a delay. Then deliver it to the target using gravity and geometry instead of throwing it like a grenade or planting it like a mine. The first iteration failed because Kowalski used gasoline for additional incendiary effect. The barrel rolled beautifully down a slope toward a German position, detonated exactly on schedule, and produced a fireball that looked devastating but caused 0 casualties because the defenders were behind concrete. Fire follows the path of least resistance. It goes up and out, not through walls. Second iteration used only high explosives. 2 German Tellermine 42 anti-tank mines, donated by the engineers who'd already pulled them from a roadway. Each mine contained 11 pounds of TNT in a pressed steel case. Kowalski removed the pressure fuses, which made the mines inert, but left the explosive intact. He positioned both mines inside the barrel with the charges facing outward to maximize lateral blast effect. Then he added C2 plastic explosive, the pliable demolition compound standard in American combat engineer units, to ensure sympathetic detonation. The ignition system was pure improvisation. M18 colored smoke grenades used a pull-ring friction igniter that created a brief spark to start the smoke composition burning. Kowalski discovered he could remove that igniter assembly, wire it to a blasting cap embedded in the C2 explosive, and create a reliable firing mechanism with a delay of approximately 4 seconds. Pull the ring. The friction igniter sparks. The spark triggers the blasting cap. The blasting cap detonates the C2. The C2 sympathetically detonates both Teller mines. The combined blast produces roughly 22 pounds of TNT equivalent, exploding in a confined steel container. The physics of that explosion matter. 22 pounds of TNT in open terrain creates a lethal radius of approximately 15 meters from fragmentation and overpressure. But confined inside a steel drum, the explosive force behaves differently. The drum fractures into hundreds of irregular fragments, traveling at velocities exceeding 1,500 meters per second. The blast wave, unable to dissipate normally, channels through any available opening, a door, a window, a ventilation gap. That channeled overpressure can rupture internal organs at distances where fragmentation might not penetrate. Kowalski tested the third iteration on an abandoned German position in a forest clearing. The barrel rolled 40 meters down a gentle slope, maintained directional stability despite uneven ground, and detonated against the concrete wall of the position. The explosion tore a section of wall loose, sent fragments through the firing port, and created enough overpressure to crack the interior supports. His platoon sergeant saw the test results and immediately confiscated the device. Not because it didn't work, because it worked too well, because it violated standing orders against unauthorized modification of munitions. Because if something went wrong during handling and an American got killed by an improvised explosive device built by another American, there would be courts-martial and investigations and the kind of paperwork that ruins military careers. But that was 3 weeks ago in a different tactical situation. This is March 18, 1945, and Lieutenant Hartley is watching his men die, one calculated shot at a time, and conventional solutions have already failed twice. Hartley crawls through the slag and debris to Kowalski's position. No preamble. "You still have that barrel?" Kowalski shakes his head. "Sergeant Paulson deep-sixed it. Orders." Hartley stares at the machine shop where the German rifles continue their methodical work. Another shot cracks out. Somewhere to the left, someone screams. "Can you build another one?" Hartley asks. Kowalski looks at the lieutenant, reads the situation. His platoon sergeant isn't here because he's 200 meters back with the casualties organizing evacuation. "Depends what you've got available," Kowalski says. What Charlie Company has available at 10:30 hours on March 18, 1945, isn't much. The company's been in continuous combat operations since crossing into Germany on March 3rd. Supply has been irregular. They're carrying what they humped from the last resupply point, plus whatever they've scrounged from abandoned German positions. Kowalski inventories the possibilities. For the container, there's a German fuel drum half buried in the slag. Empty. No visible damage. For explosives, 3rd Platoon's combat engineers have 6 Tellermine 42s they pulled from a roadway 2 days ago. The engineers also have C2 demolition charges. For ignition, Kowalski has 3 M18 smoke grenades in his own pack. The friction igniters will work. The question is whether he has time to assemble the device before the tactical situation deteriorates further. Hartley understands time pressure. He gives Kowalski 15 minutes and assigns 3 men to provide security and help with assembly. The work happens in a shell crater 50 meters behind the main defensive position. Kowalski moves fast but precise. This isn't the careful, methodical assembly of a test device. This is combat engineering. Get it built, get it working. Except that field conditions mean higher risk. The 2 Tellermines go in first. Kowalski positions them at opposite ends of the barrel's interior, explosive faces pointing outward toward the steel walls. This orientation ensures that when the mines detonate, the blast force drives the fragmented barrel material outward in a roughly 360-degree pattern. C2 plastic explosive, roughly half a pound, gets packed in the center of the barrel between the 2 mines. The blasting cap embeds in the C2. Wire from the blasting cap runs to the M18 igniter assembly, which Kowalski mounts on the exterior of the barrel near the rolled edge. Assembly takes 12 minutes. Testing takes none because there's no time and no safe way to test. Either the ignition system works or it doesn't. Either the sympathetic detonation occurs or it doesn't. Either the barrel maintains directional stability while rolling or it doesn't. Kowalski built this based on 1 successful field test 3 weeks ago. Now he's building it again under fire with lives depending on performance. Hartley examines the device. 68 pounds of improvised explosive packed in a steel drum with a friction igniter. How do we deliver it? He asks. Kowalski's already surveyed the terrain, the slag heap where Charlie Company's pinned down slopes toward the machine shop at approximately 15 degrees. Enough grade for gravity to move the barrel, not so steep that the barrel accelerates out of control. We roll it, Kowalski says. Pull the igniter, give it a push, let physics do the work. The machine shop sits 200 meters northeast. The barrel weighs 68 pounds. Rolling friction coefficient for steel on industrial slag is approximately 0.4. Gravity acceleration at 15 degrees is roughly 2.5 meters per second squared. Kowalski doesn't calculate these numbers because he's not an engineer, but he understands intuitively that the barrel will roll, will accelerate, and will cover 200 meters in somewhere between 30 and 45 seconds. The igniter has a 4-second delay, which means pull the ring when the barrel's about 190 meters from target, close enough that detonation occurs near the structure, far enough that the person pulling the ring can take cover before the blast. Hartley's concern isn't physics, it's tactics. Those German shooters aren't blind. They see a barrel rolling at them. They'll know something's wrong. They'll reposition or pull back. Kowalski nods. So we give them something else to look at. This is where the plan gets complicated. Charlie Company still has 43 effective soldiers. Hartley organizes them into 3 elements. Element 1, 12 men with automatic weapons, positions along the left flank. Element 2, 15 men with rifles and grenades, holds the center. Element 3 is Kowalski and 2 engineers with the barrel. The timing matters. Element 1 opens fire at maximum rate, not aim shots, suppressive fire. Make the German positions keep their heads down. 5 seconds after Element 1 starts shooting, Element 2 throws smoke grenades, not to mask movement this time, to create confusion, to make the Germans think another assault is developing. 10 seconds after the smoke grenades detonate, Element 3 launches the barrel. The deception depends on overwhelming the Germans' decision-making cycle. Force them to process multiple, simultaneous threats. Automatic weapons fire from an unexpected angle, smoke indicating possible assault. By the time they identify the rolling barrel as the actual threat, it's too late to do anything except take cover. Hartley synchronizes watches. 1100 hours. Element 1 initiates. The bar gunners and the few men with Thompson submachine guns open up. Tracers arc across the slag heap toward the machine shop. The volume of fire is impressive, but largely ineffective. They're shooting at hardened positions from 200 meters, with weapons designed for 100-meter engagements. But effectiveness isn't the goal. Distraction is. 5 seconds. Element 2 throws smoke. M18 colored smoke grenades aren't designed for tactical concealment, like the HC smoke grenades, but they produce enough dense smoke to obscure vision for 60 to 90 seconds. 6 grenades detonate in rapid sequence. Purple and yellow smoke billows across the approach to the machine shop. The German riflemen stop shooting. They're assessing, trying to determine if this is another assault or a feint. 10 seconds. Kowalski and the 2 engineers roll the barrel up to the forward edge of the slag heap. The barrel sits at the top of the slope, perfectly positioned. Kowalski checks the friction igniter one last time. The pull ring is accessible. The wire to the blasting cap is secure. "Ready?" one of the engineers asks. Kowalski nods. He pulls the ring. The friction igniter sparks. 4 seconds until detonation. Kowalski shoves the barrel forward. It tilts, drops over the edge of the slag heap. Starts rolling. The barrel accelerates exactly as Kowalski predicted. The cylindrical shape maintains directional stability. The uneven terrain causes slight deviation, but the overall trajectory aims true toward the machine shop. 200 meters. 190 meters. The barrel picks up speed. 180 meters. Through the drifting smoke, Kowalski can barely see it now. 170 meters. He counts seconds in his head. The igniter delay was 4 seconds from pull to detonation. He pulled the ring 6 seconds ago. The barrel should detonate any moment. Inside the machine shop, Obergefreiter Klaus Reinhardt sees the barrel. He's the senior of the 3 German riflemen, a veteran of the Eastern Front, who survived Stalingrad and somehow ended up in the Ruhr, commanding 2 conscripts barely old enough to shave. Reinhardt's first thought is that the Americans are trying to deliver supplies to forward positions using gravity. His second thought is that the barrel's moving too fast for a controlled delivery. His third thought arrives too late. The barrel detonates 15 meters from the machine shop's southern wall. 22 pounds of TNT equivalent exploding inside a fragmenting steel container produces exactly the effect Kowalski designed. The barrel disintegrates into hundreds of irregular fragments. Most fragments disperse radially outward and embed harmlessly in the ground or sail overhead. But approximately 30% of the fragmentation travels horizontally, and the machine shop sits directly in that path. Steel fragments punch through the machine shop's corrugated metal siding. The walls weren't designed to stop artillery, but they provide enough structure to deflect small arms fire. They don't stop hypervelocity fragments from an exploding drum at 15 meters. The fragments tear through the metal sheeting, through the interior brick wall behind it, through the wooden workbenches and tool racks that the Germans repurposed as firing positions. The overpressure wave follows the fragments. In open terrain, the blast wave dissipates rapidly. But the machine shop has 3 walls still intact, creating a partial enclosure. The pressure wave enters through the breached southern wall, reflects off the interior surfaces, and amplifies. Peak overpressure inside the structure reaches approximately 30 psi, enough to rupture eardrums and cause internal injuries. Reinhardt is killed instantly by a fragment that enters through the firing port he's shooting from. The fragment, roughly the size and shape of a man's finger, travels at 1,500 meters per second and strikes him in the upper chest. The 2 conscripts survive the initial fragmentation because they're positioned deeper in the structure, but the overpressure wave incapacitates both. One suffers ruptured eardrums and severe concussion. The other sustains internal injuries from the pressure differential. Hartley watches the detonation from the slag heap. The explosion is louder than he expected. The smoke and dust cloud obscures the machine shop for approximately 20 seconds. When the air clears enough to see, the southern wall is partially collapsed. The corrugated siding hangs in strips. There's no rifle fire. He orders Element 2 forward. 15 men advance under covering fire from Element 1. They close the distance to the machine shop, expecting resistance. They find 3 German soldiers, 1 dead and 2 incapacitated. The conscripts surrender without resistance. One is bleeding from his ears and can't stand without support. The other is conscious but disoriented and keeps asking in German where Reinhardt is. Charlie Company secures the machine shop at 11:15 hours. Casualties for the final assault: 0. Total American casualties for the engagement: 5 wounded from the earlier failed assaults. The tactical situation that had stalemated for 3 hours resolves in 90 seconds once the barrel detonates. Lieutenant Hartley files his after-action report at 1400 hours. He describes the engagement, the casualties, the tactical problem, and the solution. He specifically mentions Kowalski's improvised explosive device, how it was constructed, and how it was employed. He does not characterize it as unauthorized or irregular. He describes it as field-expedient munition constructed from available materials to address immediate tactical requirement. The after-action report moves up the chain of command. Battalion headquarters reviews it. Regimental headquarters reviews it. Division headquarters reviews it. At each level, officers read about Private First Class Kowalski's barrel and recognize the same problem Hartley's original platoon sergeant identified. This is an effective but unauthorized modification of standard munitions. It works, but it violates regulations. More importantly, it creates precedent. If one soldier can improvise explosive devices in the field, others will try, and improvisation introduces variables, quality control, safety protocols, accountability. On March 23, 1945, the 9th Infantry Division issues General Order 47, subsection 12. All personnel are prohibited from constructing, modifying, or deploying explosive devices not conforming to standard technical specifications as outlined in applicable field manuals. Violations will result in disciplinary action under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The order doesn't mention Kowalski by name. It doesn't need to. Everyone in the division knows what prompted it. The barrel technique is officially banned. Kowalski receives no commendation, no recognition, and a direct warning from his new platoon sergeant to never build another improvised explosive device under any circumstances. For 5 weeks, the order stands. Combat operations continue. The 9th Infantry Division drives deeper into Germany. They cross the Weser River on April 7th. They encircle German positions in the Harz Mountains by April 15th. Conventional tactics, conventional weapons, conventional casualties. Then comes Magdeburg, April 18, 1945. The tactical situation resembles the Ruhr on a larger scale. German defenders holding fortified industrial positions, American forces tasked with clearing the city. Limited artillery support because the guns are needed elsewhere. Limited air support because urban combat makes aerial bombardment too indiscriminate. Infantry expected to close with and destroy enemy positions using small unit tactics. 2nd Battalion, 60th Infantry Regiment, encounters a strong point in a converted warehouse. The building sits at a critical intersection controlling access to the Elbe River bridges. 3 approaches, all covered by interlocking fire from positions inside the warehouse. Battalion tries combined arms assault. 2 Sherman tanks move forward to suppress. German Panzerfaust teams disable both tanks from concealed positions. Artillery pounds the warehouse for 30 minutes. The building's reinforced concrete construction absorbs the barrage with minimal damage. Infantry attempts to close. Machine gun fire drives them back with 7 casualties. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Foster remembers reading something in a divisional after-action report from March, something about improvised explosives. He finds the report, reads Hartley's description of the barrel technique, reads General Order 47 that prohibited the technique. Then he makes a command decision. Foster doesn't rescind General Order 47. He doesn't have authority to countermand division-level orders. Instead, he issues a battalion-level tactical directive. Situation requires employment of field-expedient solutions to overcome fortified positions. Personnel with relevant experience are authorized to construct specialized munitions under direct officer supervision for immediate tactical application. The directive doesn't mention barrels or Kowalski, but it creates a gap in the prohibition large enough to drive a 68-pound improvised explosive device through. Kowalski's in Able Company now, transferred after the Ruhr. When his company commander receives Foster's directive, he knows exactly who has relevant experience. Kowalski gets pulled from his squad at 1600 hours and reports to the battalion command post. Foster's there with an engineer captain and an artillery lieutenant. They've got German fuel drums, captured teller mines, C2 explosives, and a tactical problem that needs solving. "Can you build 3 of those barrels by Aero 500 tomorrow?" Foster asks. Kowalski looks at the materials, looks at the officers, reads the situation. "Yes, sir, but I'll need help, and I'll need to test the igniters." Foster nods. "You've got 6 engineers. You can test whatever you need to test, and if this works, I'll make sure that Prohibition Order gets modified." Kowalski gets to work. Building 3 barrels takes most of the night. Kowalski trains the engineers as he works, showing them placement of the mines, packing of the C2, rigging of the igniters. Each barrel gets marked with chalk. Number 1, Number 2, Number 3. Simple identification for delivery sequence. By Aero 4:30 hours, all 3 devices are complete and staged near the forward positions. The tactical plan is more sophisticated than the improvised assault at the Ruhr. Foster coordinates with artillery to fire smoke rounds to mask the barrel deployment. He positions rifle squads to suppress German fire ports. He assigns engineers to deliver the barrels using predetermined routes calculated for optimal rolling distance and detonation proximity. This isn't improvisation anymore. This is doctrine in formation. At Aero 5:30 hours, artillery fires smoke. White phosphorus rounds impact around the warehouse, creating dense obscuration. Under cover of smoke, 3 engineer teams move forward with the barrels. Each team approaches from a different direction, north, east, south. West side of the warehouse backs to a river and offers no approach. The teams reach their release points, pull igniters, push barrels. 3 steel drums rolling down 3 different streets toward 3 different walls of the same target. The barrels detonate within 4 seconds of each other. The combined blast of 66 pounds of TNT equivalent exploding in fragmenting containers at 3 sides of a structure produces catastrophic effects. The northern wall partially collapses. The eastern wall sustains multiple breaches. The southern wall loses structural integrity. The warehouse doesn't collapse completely, but it's no longer a defensible position. American infantry assaults through the breached walls. They encounter scattered resistance from disoriented German defenders. The strong point that resisted artillery and armor for 6 hours falls to infantry assault in 12 minutes after the barrels detonate. American casualties for the final assault, 2 wounded. The tactical calculus is undeniable. Foster files his after-action report on April 19th. He describes the barrels, their construction, their employment, and their effectiveness. He specifically notes that the technique addressed a tactical problem that conventional methods could not solve within acceptable casualty parameters. He recommends that Division reconsider General Order 47. Division Headquarters reviews Foster's report. They also review casualty statistics. 2nd Battalion took 7 casualties in the initial assault on the warehouse. After employing the barrel technique, they took 2 casualties. The mathematics suggest that prohibition of effective techniques costs lives. On April 24, 1945, the 9th Infantry Division issues Modified General Order 47A. Employment of field-expedient munitions is authorized under direct officer supervision when tactical situation requires and conventional methods have proven ineffective. Construction and deployment must adhere to safety protocols established by battalion-level engineer officers. The modified order doesn't mandate use of barrel devices. It doesn't standardize their construction. It simply permits their employment under controlled conditions. That permission matters. By the end of April, 3 other divisions fighting in urban terrain adopt similar techniques. The barrels don't have an official designation. Soldiers call them Kowalski drums or roll mines, or simply those barrel things. The nomenclature doesn't matter. The effect does. Statistics compiled after the war tell part of the story. American forces employed improvised rolling explosive devices in at least 34 documented engagements between April 18 and May 7, 1945. Success rate varied, but averaged approximately 73%, where success is defined as neutralizing or degrading the target position sufficiently to permit successful infantry assault. Casualties during assaults employing the technique averaged 40% lower than casualties during conventional assaults on similar targets. But statistics don't capture the human element. They don't explain what it means to be a lieutenant, watching your men die from rifle fire you can't suppress, knowing that conventional doctrine offers no solution until someone like Kowalski steps forward with an idea that works. They don't explain what it means to be a division commander balancing regulatory compliance against tactical effectiveness, trying to decide whether banning a technique prevents more casualties than employing it. The tension between innovation and regulation isn't new to warfare. Military organizations exist on discipline and standardization. Tactics that work reliably are codified into doctrine. Equipment that performs predictably is mass-produced and issued. Soldiers are trained to execute established procedures under stress. This standardization creates efficiency and reduces chaos on battlefields where chaos already threatens to overwhelm command and control. But standardization also creates rigidity. Doctrine that works in one situation fails in another. Equipment designed for anticipated threats proves inadequate against unexpected challenges. And soldiers encounter tactical problems that don't match the scenarios covered in training. When that happens, military organizations face a choice: prohibit deviation and accept the limitations, or permit innovation and accept the risks. Kowalski's barrel technique represents both the value and the danger of field innovation. The value is obvious: a solution to a specific tactical problem that conventional methods couldn't solve. The danger is equally real. Improvised explosives are inherently unpredictable. There's no quality control, no standardized testing, no guarantee that a device built by one soldier will perform the same as a device built by another. Variables multiply: a poorly packed charge, a faulty igniter, a barrel with a structural weakness. Any of those variables could result in premature detonation, failure to detonate, or unintended fragmentation pattern that kills friendly forces. The military's initial prohibition made sense from a regulatory perspective. Ban the technique, eliminate the risk, maintain standardization. The problem was that banning the technique didn't eliminate the tactical problem it addressed. German defenders still occupied fortified positions. American infantry still needed to assault those positions. Casualties still mounted. Eventually, the tactical necessity outweighed the regulatory concerns. What changed wasn't the technique. What changed was the control structure around the technique. Modified General Order 47A didn't give soldiers blanket permission to build improvised explosives. It required officer supervision, engineer oversight, safety protocols. It transformed an unauthorized improvisation into a controlled field expedient. The barrels remained dangerous, but the danger was managed rather than prohibited. This distinction matters for understanding how military organizations adapt under pressure. Complete prohibition of innovation creates rigidity that gets soldiers killed. Complete freedom for innovation creates chaos that gets soldiers killed. The balance lies in controlled adaptation. Permit innovation when tactical necessity demands it. Impose structure to manage the risks. Document what works and what doesn't. Then incorporate successful innovations into formal doctrine. Kowalski never received formal recognition for developing the barrel technique. No medals, no commendations, no mention in divisional histories. His contribution exists in after-action reports and casualty statistics. The lives saved aren't named individuals with documented stories. They're statistical reductions, projected casualties versus actual casualties. The difference represents men who went home instead of dying in rubble-strewn German cities in the final weeks of the war. But that anonymity is typical of field innovation. The soldiers who develop improvised solutions rarely get credit because their innovations exist in the gap between what doctrine says should work and what actually works in combat. Doctrine gets written by staff officers analyzing operations after the fact. Field innovations get created by soldiers solving immediate problems with available materials. By the time the innovation becomes doctrine, the soldier who invented it has usually moved on, been transferred, or simply been forgotten. The barrel technique didn't survive the end of World War II. Post-war doctrine standardized on conventional demolitions and combined arms tactics. The specific tactical problems that made rolling explosive devices effective, fortified urban positions with limited artillery support, became less common as military technology advanced. Precision-guided munitions, portable anti-tank weapons, and improved communications made improvised solutions unnecessary in most situations. But the principle behind Kowalski's innovation remains relevant. Soldiers will always encounter tactical problems that doctrine doesn't address. Equipment will always have limitations that field conditions expose, and military organizations will always face the tension between standardization and adaptation. How they manage that tension determines whether soldiers like Kowalski can save lives with field-expedient solutions or whether prohibition of unauthorized techniques costs lives that might have been saved. March 18, 1945, started with 47 American soldiers, pinned down by 3 German riflemen. It ended with a tactical problem solved by a 68-pound improvised explosive device that military regulations had prohibited 5 weeks earlier. The technique was banned because it violated safety protocols. Then it was employed anyway because men were dying. Then it was banned again because regulations mattered. Then it was authorized because tactical necessity outweighed regulatory concerns. Then it saved lives because it worked. The barrel rolled down a slag heap. 68 pounds of steel and explosives accelerating under gravity toward a machine shop where 3 German soldiers had stopped an American company's advance. 4 seconds after someone pulled a friction igniter, 22 pounds of TNT exploded inside a fragmenting container. The explosion killed 1 man, wounded 2 others, and broke a tactical stalemate that conventional methods couldn't resolve. That's the story, not of a weapon, not of a tactic, but of the space between prohibition and permission, where soldiers solve problems that doctrine doesn't cover, where innovation happens because necessity demands it, and where the difference between authorized and unauthorized sometimes matters less than the difference between effective and ineffective. The technique was banned until it worked. Then it was banned again until it was needed. Then it was authorized. Because war doesn't pause for regulation to catch up with tactical reality. Because soldiers don't stop encountering problems when doctrine runs out of answers. And because sometimes the difference between winning and losing, between casualties and survival, is a steel drum packed with explosives rolling down a slope toward a fortified position that nothing else could breach. Kowalski built it, Hartley used it, Foster authorized it, Division regulated it. And somewhere in the gap between what the manual said to do and what the situation required, men survived who might have died. That's not a story about barrels or explosives or improvised devices. That's a story about how wars are actually fought, when doctrine meets reality and the soldiers in between have to bridge the gap with whatever works. The barrel technique took out 3 riflemen, but more importantly, it saved 47 American soldiers from a tactical situation that had no doctrinal solution. It broke a stalemate, it opened an advance, it accomplished the mission with acceptable casualties. Then it was prohibited, authorized, prohibited again, authorized again, employed successfully, and eventually forgotten as post-war doctrine moved on to new technologies and new tactics. What survives isn't the technique. What survives is the principle. When soldiers encounter problems that doctrine doesn't solve, they innovate. When those innovations work, military organizations face a choice: prohibit them as unauthorized or control them as field expedient. The choice determines whether tactical adaptation happens despite regulations or because of them, and that choice, made repeatedly across thousands of engagements, shapes whether military organizations can adapt fast enough to save the lives of the soldiers they send into combat. March 18, 1945, Ruhr River Valley. A banned technique, employed anyway, solved a problem that killed men until someone ignored prohibition and built what worked. The story ends there. The barrel rolled, the explosives detonated, the position fell, the war continued, and somewhere in the after-action reports and casualty statistics, a technique that shouldn't have existed proved that sometimes survival requires doing what regulations prohibit, because the alternative is accepting casualties that could have been prevented.